so much for being here. Is anybody here to try to get the Violence Against Women Act passed? Excellent, then I'm in the right place. We're so happy to have so many wonderful people here in support of the Violence Against Women Act. We're only a mere fraction of the folks all over the country who care about this bill and want to see it get done. And we're going to kick off our rally today with a person who's been leading the forefront on this from the very beginning, and he's working his hardest over there in the Senate to help get it done. So I want to introduce everyone to someone who doesn't need any introduction, Senator Patrick Leahy.
Well, I'm hoping the wonderful weather you brought will also shine on some of the people who are still trying to block the Violence Against Women Act.
Amen.
You know, for nearly 2 decades, the act has saved life. It saved lives. I've seen that. I've seen that throughout the country. And as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, let me tell you right now, we have to have this critical legislation reauthorized, and we have to have it done now. We can't wait. The irony is this has been a bipartisan effort, and we should go forward with it. You know, 6 months ago, Senator Crapo and I joined together to introduce S-1925, the Reauthorization Against the Violence Against Women Act. One of us a liberal Democrat, the other conservative Republican. But we joined hands across party lines. We wanted to make sure that people understood this was an important issue, both for the Congress, but especially for the country. And our bill didn't just suddenly appear. It's based on years of input from all the people represented here, and so many other thousands who you speak for. Our bill is based on the advocates and survivors on the front lines that fight to end domestic and sexual violence, and they fight every single day. And the least we can do is fight for them on the day it would take to have a vote here to pass this bill. Now, we've done a lot over the years. We've helped a lot of victims. I wish I could say there will be no more victims. We don't need this law anymore, but we all know we do. There are needs that are unmet. There are victims whose needs go unmet. We listened to you, and we wrote a bill to protect all victims. All victims. Now, some are saying that the Senate could not get together to pass a resolution agreeing that the sun rises in the east. But we passed this bill with a remarkable 68 votes. And that demonstrates the Leahy-Crapo Violence Against Women Act is about saving lives. It's not about partisan politics. But unfortunately, the House chose a different path. Instead of listening to the professionals as we did across the spectrum, they passed a bill that doesn't reflect the core values of VAWA. So I hope they'll listen to you, all of you, and go back and pass a bill that reflects the real needs of victims. You know, when I visit shelters or crisis centers in Vermont, as I do all the time, I'm reminded of the real suffering here. And as many of you know, I was a prosecutor. And I remember what I saw then before we had the Violence Against Women Act. I can see what we can do now if we continue it to help people. You save the lives of victims of domestic violence, that has to be above politics. We have to pass a bill that protects all victims. We have to do it quickly. You know, domestic and sexual violence knows no political party. Its victims are Republicans and Democrats, rich and poor, young and old. When I went to a crime scene as a young prosecutor with the police, and we saw somebody who had been battered, sometimes killed, the police didn't say, well, wait, we have to know, is this victim a Republican or a Democrat? Is this person gay or straight? Is this person an immigrant or not? Is this person black or white? They said, no, This person is a victim. A victim is a victim is a victim. And let's stand up and say so. So thank you for all you do. Your work has helped countless people. It's helped countless people. For one who's seen this firsthand, to me, this is a very personal thing. And I guarantee you, I will not give up until I stand there and the president who's told me he wants to sign this bill, till I can stand there with all of you and watch President Obama sign this bill that we need so badly. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we have another round of applause and thank you for our champion and our leader, Senator Leahy. We could not have gotten a better fighter and better leader than Senator Leahy to get VAWA across the finish line. Good morning, everybody. I'm Lisa Jacobs. I'm the Vice President of Government Relations from Legal Momentum. I'm your erstwhile MC and sheep herder or whatever else for today. I guess the question that I have for everybody here is, what do we want? When do we want it? Now! What do we want? When do we want it? Now! All right, let's get this party started. Our next speaker is going to be Wanamahel Dixon. She's the first Vice President for the National Congress of American Indians. She is going to do a prayer. She's going to be joined by some tribal women leaders. And she will then be introducing Senator Akaka. Thank you.
I just said in my language, hello everyone. And Chulupo Ata means come, Wiyot means creator. We ask that creator come here and be with us. I ask that our heart be strong. I ask that the women of our nations, of tribal countries that we belong to, the sovereignty nations we belong to, and all our sisterhood, that's you, all of our brothers who are here, who have come to stand behind us. We ask that we remember that we give breath to the words. They no longer belong to us, they belong to the people. So this is why we think of what we say and do with you today, that we ask for VAWA to be passed. Creator, in your hands, we lay this gift of protection that you can give us that we don't get physically from this country. Creator protects us because this country won't. So I ask you, Creator, for us to be patient in heart and mind, to understand the thinking of mankind. We ask that you reach out across the differences of our religion and our ideas and our thoughts, that we come together in mind, thought, body, and spirit, so that we can be together collectively in this thinking in Creator's hands. We do these things. I ask, Creator, for all the unborn children, for all the women murdered and missing of our nations and of everyone in this place, to be thought of in this moment. My mother gave to the women of the nations, of the sovereign nations, a song. And I'm going to sing that song to you. It's 6 generations of my grandfather sang this song. As we grew, people, the two-legged, the five-fingered people, we knew that Creator had lived with us, that we could speak with all the creatures of the earth and the animals. Everything around us were relatives and spoke. Creator knew that once this had been achieved, this harmony, that Creator could leave us to understand how to be human beings in relationship with everything and with you. So in this song, Creator has to leave, but it's teaching us how to accept change and to let go those things we can't hang on to, those things that we don't need to have. So Creator left us. And in the story of the song, it talks about how Coyote, she went in the 4 directions to find the healing to heal Creator, so Creator would not die. And in this song, she comes back from the West realizing that Creator is going to finish his journey or her journey, how you see it. But then there's another part that Creator says, do not be afraid, you are the little people. There's a big person coming for you, and you're all going to be okay. And in this song, we ask to let go those things that can give us ill will or different feelings, that we take a spirit, rise it high, and change this nation's thinking in Congress to pass VAWA. And in this song, I sing to you to let it round, to hug you, hold you, And if you can join me in the chorus, do so. Shapuno Yulie, Shapuno Yulie, Alleluia, Shapuno Yulie, Tokame no Shuno, Tokame no Shuno, Hewatu, no Shuno Pulie, Alleluia, Shapuno Yulie, let it go. Whoa, 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 Naqualium, Naqualium, Hallelujah, Wanalam sho, 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 mahe, Wanaqualium. Oh yeah, Wanagua, hey, watu, Wanagua, hallelujah, Wanalam sho, oh sho, mahe, Wanagua, let it go. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, for all the unborn children and the murdered and missing. Whoa, 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 all my relations. I know that Senator Caucus is in the area, right? Woohoo! Is he making his way, our partner in life? He has been one of the most remarkable people in our lives. Is he on his way?
I think he's on his way. While we're waiting for Senator Akaka to join us, we've been joined by Congresswoman Judy Biggert from the 13th District of the great state of Illinois. She's been a terrific champion for us for VAWA on the House side. Please welcome Congresswoman Biggert.
Thank you all for being here and for inviting me to speak. It's absolutely wonderful to see all of my best allies in the fight against domestic violence and their supporters gathered here at the nation's capital to speak with one voice. For those of you who haven't seen them in action, you should know that these leaders from NOW, the task force, the National Congress of American Indians, and so many others have become fixtures in the halls of Congress, keeping us informed and recruiting new allies to the cause. They are great, dedicated advocates like Julie Fulcher with Break the Cycle, Rob Valente with the National Network to End Domestic Violence, and Vicki Smith with the Illinois Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I don't need to tell you that the reauthorization of VAWA is more important than ever right now. We're in the midst of a really tough economic place, a recession. Household stress is on the rise, and sexual and domestic violence threaten women and men alike, at home, on the streets, and even on the reservations. So we must ensure that all victims have a safe place to go and give prosecutors the tools to go after every single offender. The next reauthorization of VAWA can and should do just that. It must strengthen penalties for sexual assaults, improve stalking laws, and expand campus outreach and protect all victims. And we need to give local centers the flexibility to meet local needs. The reason I'm here today is because of something I learned in Washington. It's because of, not what I learned in Washington, but it's because what I learned at home from the volunteers, the counselors, and crisis center workers like you. I've hosted many meetings with advocates at local shelters to listen to their concerns and get feedback on how we can make their jobs easier. That's why I began writing my version of the bill, the VAWA bill, a companion to the Senate measure, well before the House even took up VAWA. Unfortunately, my bill wasn't voted on. And the bill that did pass failed to reflect everything we learned over the past 5 years in terms of what works best for prosecutors or victims. It failed to clarify equal treatment for LGBT individuals or bolster enforcement on Native American reservations. So I can tell you firsthand that my colleagues on both sides want to pass the best bill possible to protect victims of domestic violence. But it's up to us to tell them what the bill really should look like and why. Let your members of Congress know that this isn't about opening another partisan battle line. This is about recognizing that anyone can be a victim of domestic violence. It can happen in a same-sex household, on a college campus, or a Native American reservation. And our victim service providers on the front lines just want to know that they can help anyone who comes through the door. That's right. And the anti-violence, the anti-violence committee has worked for 2 years to develop technical changes and recommendations that will make VAWA work better and even make it work cheaper. So it's time to put those recommendations to work and pass a bipartisan compromise that the House, the Senate, and most importantly, the American people can be proud of. And I know that if people like you can come to Washington and give members the kind of input that I received at the shelters at home, then we will get it done. So there will be a conference coming up, and I think that hopefully I will bend more towards the Senate bill, because I think that's where we should be, and that's what I will do. Thank you, and good luck. It's great to be here.
Oh, geez. I know that Senator Akaka is making his way here. He said he was walking forward, and I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge him and the work that he's done as one of the true indigenous people of the lands of Hawaii. And he has led in the Senate Indian Affairs Committee, as well as working for many of the women and national orgs for VAWA in this country. He has championed not only for us as Native women, but for all of you. And I am moved by the fact that we understand in our societies that the heartbeat of our women, as long as it continues to beat, we have a chance to move this forward. And you've done so much, Senator Akaka, on our behalf in moving the SAFE bill for Native American women, and the work of women across the country, and the thoughts that you've given and the prayer that you've given. He had sacrificed so much. As he makes his way through the crowd, as you see, Senator Akaka is one of the true wisest leaders we have around, that has taken the learned steps of this time in Congress and in this city and brought together a combination of knowledge and understanding. He comes with our president of the National Congress of American Indians, Jefferson Kill. Senator Akaka, please come forward.
Aloha! Oh my, we are in one voice. And that's what we need. We need a voice and one voice. And we have it here. I could hear you all the way to the Capitol. Aloha mai kako. It is my great pleasure to be here with all of you today, along with my colleagues. Who's not here, they will be here soon. Senator Patrick Leahy and Representative Brandon Moore. She may be here already. As you draw attention to the much needed reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act that's passed by the Senate this past April. I want to thank all of you for raising your voices on this issue and encourage you to continue to advocate on behalf of all women and their rights to justice and to be free of violence. am proud of the work we did in the Senate. We passed a bipartisan measure to strengthen our nation's response to violence against Native women and gave states, tribes, and community organizations the tools to better protect women and help them heal. A woman's safety should not be contingent on where she lives or her identity of her attacker, but the present federal law has created a jurisdictional maze in Indian country, effectively giving non-Indian offenders a free pass. A free pass for crimes committed against women on the reservations. As chairman of the Indian Affairs Committee, I was alarmed to find that 1 in 3 Native women are likely to be raped, and 88% of violent acts against Native women who are perpetuated by non-Native offenders who are outside the reach of tribal law enforcement. With the help of groups like the NCEI Task Force, I worked to craft legislation that would close these jurisdictional loopholes. We've got to get rid of the loopholes and strengthen women's safety in Native communities. Mahalo to and thank you to all of you for tirelessly working to ensure we got these provisions right for Native communities. I must tell you that I was very disappointed that the House left these and other important provisions out of their bill. As advocates, we must work together to make VAWA inclusive of all women. In closing, there is a Native Hawaiian saying I'd like to leave with all of you. A'oi hana nui ke aluia. No task is too big when done together. And we must do this together. To share your views with the congressional delegations this week. I want to thank you again for welcoming me here today. And together, we can make a difference in the lives of women across our great nation. Let's raise our voices to that, and thank you very much for that.
Don't stop, you sound terrific. I was actually about to come up here and give you guys a hard time. Mahalo, Senator. I mean, he, made the point and the case beautifully, and there was some applause and some appreciation. I find that those of us inside the Beltway behave a little bit too politely. I believe that we came here to demand some attention, am I right? Yeah! What do we want? When do we want it? Now! What do we want? VAWA! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? VAWA! When do we want it? Now! Thank you. Thank you. Has Congresswoman Moore joined us yet? Okay. In the meantime, and before we move on in the program, I wanted to do a couple of housekeeping things. Under the tree over there are programs with the order of the speaker If you're a member of the press, there are some bios and quotes from speakers. There are also sign-in sheets. There's some people handing them out through the crowd as well. If you are either Hill staff or press, there are also sign-in sheets over there under the tree. Please make sure you leave us with your information so that we can get you additional details, because this is actually a week of action, running all the way up to the 4th of July, Independence Day, because this really is all about independence for survivors of violence. And we're not going to stop, and we're not going to be quiet until we get this bill passed, and until we get the right bill passed. Because this really is all about simple justice. Fannie Lou Hamer put it very eloquently and simply when she said, we have a job to do. Our job is to bring in justice where there's been so much injustice. And you heard the senator talk about it, the simple fact that Native women cannot be free from violence, particularly from non-Native violent partners. That's injustice. The simple fact that immigrant women and those provisions have been under challenge in this VAWA, that's injustice. The simple fact that the LGBT community cannot reliably call law enforcement and expect that the laws are going to be enforced freely and fairly when they're victims of abuse, that's injustice. So it's time to stop this playing around. It's time for the Congress to do its job before it goes home. It's time to get it done now, Congress. What do we want? When do we want it? Now! What do we want? VAWA! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? VAWA! When do we want it? Now! I'm now going to introduce one of our great leaders of the movement, Rita Smith, who is the Executive Director of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. She will be introducing our next speaker, singer and songwriter Michael Bolton.
Thank you, Lisa. That was good. Get us pumping. It is really important that if you don't have anything else planned this afternoon, that you go to your congressional member's office and get them on the stick. Yeah. They need to get this done, and it's really not that hard. Michael is a multi-Grammy-winning singer and songwriter. He's sold over 53 million albums, records worldwide. He continues to tour. He actually made a point of cramming this visit in before he had to go to Denmark on another international tour, and I'm so thankful to him for that. He's been recognized with many humanitarian awards. He's had a foundation for over 20 years, Michael Bolton Charities, that has actually provided support to women and children at risk. He came on board to get VAWA reauthorized well over 10 years ago and has never said no when I said, Michael, I need your help. He's here again today. He is an activist. That's how I know him. He's an amazing singer. Obviously, people know that. But he is an amazing activist. He is a good man, and it's time we had more good men standing up. Michael Bolton.
That's my hero right there, Rita. Thank you so much for the introduction, for your friendship, partnership, and for being so inspiring to all of us. I'm grateful to be here with you all today to join Senator Akako, Chairman Leahy, who's been doing this work for many, many years, since I can remember, Congresswoman Moore, Congresswoman Bigger, in a call to action. I'm here to talk about men, the 31 men in the Senate who oppose VAWA. What do they know about the terror of being violated and beaten? Why are they not willing to help immigrant, Native women, and GLBT victims of domestic violence and sexual assault? Don't these communities deserve to be protected? Don't these victims also deserve to be free of beatings and rape and death? And similar men, House leaders, who wrote a bad bill that takes protections away that are currently available. They cannot be representing their constituents. The majority of the people of this country support VAWA. Passing this bill will directly and explicitly assist with the desperate needs of shelter, counseling, and empowerment of all victims that all victims deserve. I'm also talking about men who hit and rape because they can, because they tell their victims that no one will believe them if they tell. Men who call women demeaning words to tear them down. Finally, I want to talk about the boys and men who stand up to bullies, stalkers, beaters, and rapists, the fathers and husbands and sons, the judges and cops, the doctors and nurses who want to heal both the body and the souls of the survivors. Men who are working as part of the large nationwide, worldwide effort to stop the sexual, domestic, and dating violence that continues to ravage our homes, our schools, the military, our churches, and anywhere that girls and women dare to work, live, and thrive. I'm here because through my own organization, I have worked for over 20 years to assist women and children at risk. I want to encourage other men to stand up, speak out, and demand an end to violence against women. We must get VAWA passed and signed by President Obama. And it must be a bill that protects all victims. All victims. Now, I have 3 daughters, 2 granddaughters. That's 5. My parents were divorced, and though I was very close with my father, my mother really did a lot of the raising of the 3 of us. These are our daughters, our sisters, our mothers. These are the women that we need to do the right thing by. And we need to be Americans and just do the right thing. Yeah. So, on that, I would just like to say, when a man loves a woman, they do the right thing.
Michael Bolton. Yay! Thank you for all that you have done for this movement. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your words. Thank you for your energy. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been joined by another congressional leader, a champion, a fighter in this movement, Congresswoman Gwen Moore from Wisconsin. I know that when she was on the floor of the House as the, to put it politically problematic, version of the House bill was passed, so many of us were glued to our television screens, listening to her share her own story and cheering her on. Yes. We were all at our computers, literally sort of in a collective world going, amen, tell it, and preach. She's a leader and a fighter in this movement. I give you Congresswoman and a shero. I give you Congresswoman Gwen Moore.
Brothers and sisters, here we are on a blazing hot summer day, waiting for Congress to pass VAWA. And for passing the right version of VAWA. For 18 years, VAWA has provided a national streamlined response to addressing domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. This law has been bipartisan and it's been extremely popular. And all along the way, Congress on both sides of the aisle have amended and changed and enhanced this bill to make sure that it collects and corrects and adjusts so that all women could be supported.
All women.
Right. There was a time when we didn't know about stalking. There was a time when we only arrested the prostitutes and we didn't realize that trafficking was a problem. There was a time when law enforcement was not responsive to domestic violence. They thought it was a man's right to discipline his woman. And that time has come again. When the best practices of law enforcement, we're talking about really left-wing groups like the FBI, like the district attorneys, like the order of the police have decided, along with people who shelter women, that we've got to expand VAWA to include very, very vulnerable women, women in the shadows, women in the dark, women who are immigrants, women who are of color, women who live on tribal lands. Tribal lands have become a veritable hunting ground for predators because there are no consequences for sexual assault or a battery on tribal lands. And so these left-wing folk have come together with advocates and said we need to fix VAWA. But what have people in Congress done? They have drugged their feet because their ideology won't allow them to see immigrant women, won't allow them to see women of color, and certainly won't allow them to see the plight of lesbians. And so the bill that they provided in the House not only does not speak to these upgrades that best practices have said that we need to do, but they roll back protections. They go backwards. And so I am here to urge all of you to go and swarm the Hill with your voices, with your stories, with your anger, with your rage. And I'm telling you, I want you to tell them that we can't support a bill that doesn't reflect the diversity of our community. All women are not white women, people. Surprise! All women are not straight women. Surprise! All women are not people who immigrated here. Some of them are actually native people. And they deserve protection as the first people on this continent. And we demand that they be a part of a VAWA bill that the Senate bill put forward on a supermajority basis. Just let me say that last weekend, as I was returning back to Milwaukee from burying my 99-year-old aunt, we rolled down the highway listening to Michael Bolton, but I have never heard him sound as good as he did today. Because he's singing my song today, sisters. Thank you so much for coming out. This is a great presence. And you know what? People do move Congress. And so thank you for coming here during a very, very, very contentious week. We are not going to be forgotten as women because of all the other stuff that is going on. All right, sisters, let's move forward.
Pass VAWA now!
Thank you, Congresswoman Moore. We're next going to be joined by Karen Quimby, Regional Field Director for the Human Rights Campaign.
My name is Karen Quimby, the Regional Field Director at the Human Rights Campaign, the largest lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender civil rights organization in the United States. On behalf of our 1 million members and supporters, I am here to say Congress must send a bipartisan, inclusive VAWA bill to the President and ensure that LGBT victims of domestic violence are not left behind. LGBT individuals experience domestic violence at roughly the same rate as the general population. Unfortunately, real stories from LGBT victims show they face discrimination from service providers, have been laughed at by law enforcement, and struggle to get protective orders from judges. Often, these victims are left without any option but to return to their abuser. The VAWA reauthorization bill passed by the Senate with a strong bipartisan vote in April contains provisions that include LGBT victims in federal grant programs and prohibits service providers from discriminating against LGBT victims. These provisions were placed in the bill after the VAWA National Task Force solicited information from over 2,000 service providers, law enforcement professionals, prosecutors, judges, and constituency groups to identify gaps in the current VAWA. The reauthorization bill passed by the House completely ignores the needs of LGBT victims. It completely ignores the advice of hundreds and thousands of domestic violence advocates. It is a partisan bill that does not allocate resources for service providers to do outreach to the LGBT community and allows service providers to continue to discriminate against LGBT victims in many states. The spirit of VAWA demands that VAWA be expanded to cover all vulnerable communities, including the LGBT community. The law should not be picking and choosing which victims are most deserving of support. As I said when I began, it is time for Congress to send a bipartisan, inclusive VAWA to the President and ensure that LGBT victims of domestic violence are not left behind.
Thank you, Karen. I think those of us here are all committed to seeing an inclusive VAWA, one that includes the LGBT communities, the immigrant communities, communities of color, communities of women in later life, all the communities that make up VAWA, communities of survivors, whether or not they are gay or straight, male or female, young or old. Continuing in our fight for VAWA, we will next hear from Juan Carlos Arian, who's the director of the National Latino Network for Healthy Families and Communities, Casa de Esperanza. Juan Carlos.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Nice to see some signs in Spanish over there. And nice to see more and more guys. This is, there's progress. I've been doing this for 20 years. Clearly there's some progress. So we need more, but this is a good movement. Ever since the passage of the original Violence Against Women in 1994, Congress has recognized that the immigration status of victims is one of the most powerful tools that can be used by abusers against them. That is why in the original law and the reauthorizations of 2000 and 2005, there has been wide bipartisan support for the immigration remedies of VAWA. At Casa de Esperanza, we have worked with hundreds of immigrant women who had suffered horrible abuse and yet who had had the strength to recreate their lives and build lives that are fulfilling, that are thriving, along with their children, along with their communities, and it's all because of those immigration remedies. So, what has changed now? What is different? If anything, the life of immigrants, of undocumented immigrants in this country has become much more precarious, as we all know, due to anti-immigrant sentiment in the country and due to unfair anti-immigrant federal and state laws such as secure communities and such as the Arizona law that was just partly upheld by the Supreme Court yesterday. Yes. If anything, what has changed is that the abusers of these vulnerable victims can take advantage of their well-founded fear of deportation, which is happening all the time, right? We're deporting victims as well as many other people, and they can entrap them and terrorize them and violate them almost with total impunity. That is what has changed. This is not a time in which we can afford to reduce remedies for immigrant women and other women of color. If anything, we need more protections for them. We need more U visas. We need more T visas. We need an easier process for self-petition for the victims and their children. We also need to continue funding programs for non-immigrant Latinas, of course, and for other women of color, as it has been mentioned, because these programs are vital life-saving services for many unrepresented communities. If Congress fails to pass the real VAWA, as Senator Akaka said, we will be giving a free pass to perpetrators of terrible crimes against immigrant women, against other women of color, against Native women, against LGBTQ victims. So we cannot afford to do that. We need to pass VAWA now, the real VAWA. Thank you very much.
Now. Next, we will be joined by Terry O'Neill, President of the National Organization for Women, a fighter for all women and for all survivors.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am so thrilled to see all of you here to gather together to demand that the Congress, and I'm talking about not both chambers, the House of Representatives and the Senate, they have to work together to pass the inclusive VAWA, the only bipartisan VAWA, the Senate version of VAWA. That's what we want. Now you're going to hear that there's some kind of procedural gridlock that is stopping people from moving together. I'm here to tell you that is false. I have heard the Speaker of the House of Representatives, I've seen him reported today to be saying that, ooh, you know, this procedural gridlock is really a problem. That is a false statement. I'm going to repeat this, because if you think about it, it is an outrage that a man who purports to hold the high office of the Speaker of the House of Representatives of the United States of America would gladly sit there and tell a statement that is simply false by saying there's some kind of procedural gridlock that's holding us up. There is not. It is time to pass the Senate version of VAWA now. We will not accept accept the House version of VAWA or anything that looks anything like it. The House version of VAWA, which was opposed by 23 champions of women's rights, 23 brave Republicans, does not deserve to have the name Violence Against Women Act attached to it. That bill is a piece of poison. That bill fundamentally transforms the entire set and structure of programs in the Violence Against Women Act. The House bill engages in victim shaming and victim blaming. It increases costs to service providers, making it harder for service providers to get services to the victims and the survivors who need it. And really what is the most shameful of all, because so many people who voted for that House bill say that they believe in law and order, and they voted for a bill that coddles violent perpetrators of crimes. We will not stand for the House bill or anything like it. We demand the Senate bill. We know that the leaders of both chambers of Congress can work together to get the Senate bill before both houses to vote on it. We want the Senate bill. We want it now. We will take nothing less. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Terry. It's always good to have people come out and speak truth to power, and she is correct. As the House claims, oh, there's a procedural problem. It's funny how those procedural problems only seem to come up when they're bills they don't really want to deal with, and that when they want to deal with them, they can perfectly well deal with them and move right past them. We're not going to deal with the roadblocks anymore. No more excuses. Pass VAWA now. 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 One of the great privileges of working in this town for a while and ending up doing a job like this is that you often get to introduce your friends. I'm proud to next welcome to the microphone a leader, a warrior, and a champion who I also have the privilege to call friend, Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, Executive Director of the National Council of Negro Women.
I have exceedingly great taste in friends, don't I? I stand before you today stating publicly for the first time that I too am a survivor of domestic violence. From a very personal perspective, I know the pain, I know the manipulation, I know the shame that is associated with being battered by someone whom you love and who claims to love you. Yet, I am one of the fortunate ones, having made it through that difficult period in my life and moving on to a future that provided endless promise and possibilities, but far too many women, their futures have been damaged irreparably. Their promise has been cut short. Their possibilities have been forever altered, if not ended altogether. Let's be very clear. The Violence Against Women Act saves lives. And for millions of women, it has been that one lifeline, that one pathway to safety and true freedom when no other existed. As for women of color and for Black women specifically, who are 2.5 times more likely to die at the hands of her abusers than other women, and more likely to end up imprisoned as a result of the experience, it has become especially crucial that we maintain culturally specific programs Programs with the full knowledge and respect of the distinct culture, the traditions, and the social mores of the women whom they seek to serve. This is, in fact, a necessity. Across the country, we know that communities of color already have in existence strong, culturally specific programming that indeed do a wonderful job of addressing the needs of women who in fact face violence in their lives. VAWA can and should make sure that those organizations have the funding that they need to provide service to victims of violence in their specific language and in their cultural experience. This, my friends, is the real VAWA. A VAWA that protects and serves all of those in the most effective way possible. How many more Marissa Alexanders do we need to see? A woman who was locked up for 20 years for having the unmitigated gall of using non-lethal force to protect herself against her abuser only days after giving birth. How many more do we need to see? No more! How many more Yvette Cades do we need to see? A woman who was doused with lighter fluid and set on fire by her abusive ex-husband only days after having her protective order rescinded above her objections. How many more do we need to see? No! How many more Margaret Allens do we need to see? How many more Nikki McFadders do we need to see? Or the countless other black women who themselves met their deaths at the hands of their abusers? How many do we need to see? No more! I say no more. It ends today. Yes. It ends today, and it ends in part because of a stronger and a better VAWA, a real VAWA that leaves no victims behind. A VAWA that indeed protects and serves all of us, not just a select few. Do your job, Congress. Pass VAWA now.
Thank you, Avis. Sometimes when a speaker leaves the microphone, all they've left you to say is, amen. And in our grand faith tradition with amen, it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce our next speaker, another warrior and champion in the cause for justice and for peace, Rabbi David Saperstein, Director of the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism.
Let me tell you, as an American, as a Jew, as a representative of the broad range of religious communities, as a father, a son, a husband, let me tell you what I don't want to see. I don't want to see a world without VAWA. A world in America in which intimate partner violence was neither criminalized nor even frowned upon. I don't want to see a world any longer in which a policeman called to a scene of a crime where domestic violence was evident would just walk the angry husband around the block to cool him down. I don't want to see a world in which there is no counseling, no housing, no services for victims of domestic violence once they were brave or simply desperate enough to escape. But that is precisely the world which we risk returning to if VAWA is not reauthorized. Houses of worship, my friends, are often the first places that victims of domestic violence turn to. And faith leaders know all too well the services that are provided through VAWA are indispensable to the well-being and often the literal survival of women. That is what is at stake. And while we absolutely cannot risk losing the provisions already detailed in VAWA, the improvements in the Senate version of this year's reauthorization are timely, essential, vital to help fulfilling the promise of this extraordinary legislation. It is simply preposterous to assert that women shall be protected from violence unless they are immigrants. Emma Lazarus, a great woman poet whose words are inscribed on the Statue of Liberty, welcoming generation after generation of immigrant women, did not write, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free, except if you are victims of domestic violence." And it cannot be that this promise will be denied. The women who represent communities that long predated the coming of European Americans, our native communities, those communities who have been the victims of violence, of deprivation, of oppression, of virtually an unprecedented degree. And now it is being vetted on individual victims of domestic violence. It simply cannot be, nor those simply because, although they are created in the image of the divine, are part of the LGBT community. All Americans are equal, and all women are equal. Just according to the House version over there, some women are just a little less equal. And a VAWA that prioritizes some Americans over the others is simply not acceptable. That's right. It is shameful. And indeed, it would be an act of violence against those unprotected populations. These ideas are not new. They are not new. In the Talmud, 2,000 years ago, at the time that Jesus lived, the rabbis wrote, you cannot force, a husband cannot force sexual relations on her wife, on his wife. And in the medieval times, Maimonides, the greatest of the scholars, talked about the need for husbands to treat their wives with respect and kindness. And again, reiterated the prohibition against forcing sex on them. They could not be the victims of violence. It is not what God wants. It is not what we want. And so to those who are considering voting against VAWA when it comes back, in a form I hope close to the Senate form, I would ask those, and I understand, you understand the realities of partisan politics, of ideological divides, of electoral politics. We all understand it. And we know how powerful those can be in checking conscience. But I would simply ask of them one thing, just one thing, before they cast that vote. Just think, what if their daughter were part of those unprotected populations? Because I truly believe if they think that for a moment, they will vote with their heart as well as their mind. And they will be the ones to say, pass VAWA now.
It's all good. It's all good. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you for sharing with us. And where you ended is absolutely fitting. Somehow the members of Congress, particularly of the House, seem to think that some of these provisions protecting survivors of violence are about the other, when the statistics tell us very clearly they are about our mothers, about our brothers, about our friends, about people in this crowd, about people who work in these buildings, about people all across this country. What we need is a VAWA that is a VAWA for everyone, and that is the Senate bill. That is why we need to get VAWA passed now. That is why we need to stop talking about technicalities and blue slips and things that cause people's eyes to gaze over and act as if they are here to do the job and the will of the people. The job and will of the people wants you to pass VAWA now before you go home. And we will be here every day until you hear us and until you do your jobs. Pass VAWA now. 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 my privilege to introduce our next speaker, Neil Irvin, who is the Executive Director of Men Can Stop Rape. Neil? Okay. Or, the job of a policy wonk is always to have a plan B. Plan B is to see where we are in the program. Julie Fulcher, who's the Policy Director for Break the Cycle, is now going to join me at the podium and introduce our next speaker, Colin Goddard.
As you heard, I'm with Break the Cycle. If you're not familiar with us, we work on addressing the issues of dating and sexual violence in young people, specifically between the ages of 12 and 24. Now, I'm looking out here today, and I see a lot of faces of young people. I don't have to tell them it's important. Young people know how important this issue is. The CDC says that 70% of all the women who experience domestic violence first experience it under the age of 25. 80% of all the women who are sexually assaulted first sexually assaulted before the age of 25. It is important that we be talking in our elementary schools, our middle schools, our high schools, our colleges to try to address this issue. And a lot of people are saying, you know, well, what's important that we pass this VAWA anyway? I mean, we've got a lot of good programs going. They'll probably continue. We know we don't have any guarantees unless we get VAWA reauthorized, but what we also know is that there are very important new provisions in this VAWA that are designed to address the young people all throughout this country. And if we don't get a VAWA this year, they don't get protection this year. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. And what I also want to say here is that this is not a women's issue. You've heard it by everybody up here. This is a human issue. And so I am pleased to introduce a young man to come up here and talk to you about how important it is for young people on this issue.
Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colin Goddard. 5 years ago, while I was a college student, I was sitting in French class one April morning when about halfway through class, another young man in our school entered our building with 2 guns and proceeded to shoot for about 10 minutes. There were 17 people in my classroom that day, and I'm one of 7 people who are still alive. At the end of the 10 minutes, 32 young men and women, 32 Virginians, 32 Americans were killed. I've been fortunate enough to make a good recovery from the 4 gunshot wounds that I sustained that day, and ultimately led me up here today. You know, I think anyone who experiences an incident of violence quite often gets faced with the question of why. Why did this happen to me? And that's a tough question to answer, especially for me, for the person who's no longer here. And what I found is a much more answerable question is how? How did this happen to me? And when going to find that answer and looking back, we learned that the person who walked in my building that day 5 years ago was not someone new to the school, was not someone new to our counselors, was not somebody new to our administrators. This was a person who had been stalking young women on our campus. This was a person who had been seen doing bizarre violent behavior, yet there wasn't a proper intervention. And as a result, 32 people died. So for the first time in VAWA, the Virginia Tech families, along with the Virginia Tech Family Foundation, have added language that would for the first time put dating and sexual violence and stalking on the radar for universities, to allow young men and women to report in a more effective way to their RAs, to their teachers, to their counselors, to administrators, incidences that they experience. It would also, for the first time, create a national office up here for all universities across this country to gather best practices and policies to help other schools, smaller schools, for example, that don't have the proper resources, to develop proper threat assessment teams and protect young men and women on campuses and develop ways to intervene. You know, like I said, the how is the answer that is easier for me. You know, I understand that hindsight is 20/20, but shame on us for not making progress with that clarity. Shame on us for not making new ways to intervene before even worse things happen to people. You know, we need the Campus Safety Act and the Campus Save Act in VAWA. We need the best VAWA to go to the White House. And we need that done now.
As a Virginian and as an American, Colin, I thank you. We are now going to move to Vita Shook, who is the president of the Association of Flight Attendants. I'd like to thank both that union as well as the American Federation of Teachers, which has generously donated our signs today. Our brothers and sisters from the union have been with us in this fight for many, many years, as I think you're about to hear, and we are very grateful for your help. Vita.
Thank you, and first of all, I just want to acknowledge this Capitol behind us and what it represents. It really represents the melting pot of this great country, and I am proud to be here today in coalition with my union sisters and brothers. I also saw AFGE in the house today. And all of us coming together for a very important cause. And when we come together, as we heard from Senator Akaka earlier today, nothing is impossible, and we're here to show that it doesn't matter what our gender or our sexuality or our race or our age or our national origin, none of that matters when we come together, and none of that prohibits, unfortunately, domestic violence. So, as was mentioned, I'm president of the Association of Flight Attendants. We represent nearly 60,000 members at 21 carriers, and our union is also proud to be a part of the 700,000 member strong CWA and the 12 million member AFL-CIO. Obviously, collectively, we urge Congress to reconcile and pass the real VAWA. Just want to mention for a moment that I'm a flight attendant for Alaska Airlines, and as president of AFA, I also represent and cross all the disaffected groups that we seek to protect today, from Native Alaskans who come from the remotest villages that are only accessible by air travel, to our members who are as diverse as our great nation, and our international crews who tend to the needs of the international community and who may unknowingly encounter victims of human trafficking. Within AFA, fully 1% of our membership reports domestic abuse. And I want you to understand that that statistic is within a union with a peer-supported structure, with a confidential reporting system, with access to service. We all know that that number is much higher, but even at 1%, it's too much. Our program serves to help our members find the services. However, unfortunately, every day we have to tell members that are in same-sex couples that they will not be able to receive the same services that a victim who happens to be abused by someone of the opposite sex can avail herself of. This really should be called the Protects Against Domestic Violence Act, and it's not just women, as we know, that are victims of this. Additionally, VAWA needs to extend protections to immigrant victims, including victims of international human trafficking. AFA is working with Department of Homeland Security and its Blue Campaign to help identify human trafficking. According to the Department of Justice, it's estimated that between 600 and 800,000 victims of human trafficking cross our borders every year. These victims are ripped from their families, manipulated, and abused. And if we fail to provide safe refuge to these victims, we're guilty of abetting their continued enslavement. Real VAWA's immigration provisions address the ability of abusers to control their victims over fears about their immigration status. One should never be a victim that is forced to choose between living with abuse and facing deportation. Again, we need to pass the real VAWA. So all of this together, we are collectively on the same page, and together we'll pass the real VAWA. Thank you.
Thank you, Vita. We are next going to be joined by Barbara Palmer, who is the Director of Programs at the YWCA of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County in Maryland. Barbara.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Palmer, Director of Programs for the YWCA of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. The YWCA of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County was founded in 1920 and is one of the leading human service organizations in Anne Arundel County. We operate Arden House, the only domestic violence safe house in Anne Arundel County. It sleeps 21 women and children. The YWCA of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County offers domestic violence and sexual assault counseling, 24-hour sexual assault and domestic violence hotlines, medical accompaniment for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, support groups, an abuser intervention program, anger management, and legal services. Our organization is dedicated to eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. As we are all painfully aware, 1 in 4 women in the United States are victims of domestic violence. I'm here today to speak about some of the brave women who are able to escape violent homes. Every year, the YWCA of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County serves 212 women and children. On any given day, we could have a waiting list for our domestic violence safe house of up to 5 people. This is not a reflection or an inability of us to be able to serve these women and families that come to us for assistance, but instead an illustration of the reality that most shelters and direct service agencies have limited capacity due to lack of funding. If we don't have room at our shelter, we will coordinate with neighboring shelters outside of our county to get those who are in need safety. The situation often has downsides, including uprooting the children from their schools, from their friends, and from their communities, as well as our clients possibly having to change a job or lose their job due to the distance or lack of adequate transportation. For those women and children who remain on our waiting list to receive our services, they often have 2 choices: stay with an abusive partner for an unknown period of time, putting them and their children at risk, or stay with friends and family who may only be able to accommodate them for a small period of time. I wanted to share how the YWCA and other organizations like ours are here today take pride in serving all victims of violence who walk through our doors. 3 in 4 immigrant women have reported that their spouses never filed immigration applications for them, even though they were eligible for legal status. Without VAWA, we would not be able to help clients with all of their needs. As an example, I want to share a story with you of one of our clients named Mary, who is from Canada. After years of physical and emotional abuse by her husband, Mary decided she had had enough. She was tired of his threats to kill her, his threats to take away her children. She was tired of the beatings that left her with black eyes and bruises. Mary decided to call the YWCA's domestic violence hotline. After calling the hotline and speaking with one of our crisis advocates about resources available to her, Mary decided to leave. She came to our safe house in January, and it was one of the most complex cases we have seen in a long time. Her situation, like most victims of violence, was complicated by several factors. In Mary's case, she had a factor in the well-being of her 2 children, she had to also take into account certain citizenship issues. Mary's 2 children remained with their father. This was very challenging for our client as she missed them dearly every day. To add to this, because Mary's abuser had been controlling her finances and proof of documentation for so long, she had never been able to apply for paperwork as she needed, a tactic often used by abusers to keep victims from leaving. Being away from her children was the hardest part of deciding to leave. The YWCA advocates assisted Mary with counseling, support groups, and any other resources that could alleviate her worry. She often expressed concern about being apart from her children, seeing them only once a week due to strict visitation to ensure her safety. The YWCA's legal advocates at our courthouses who work on VAWA, as well as the dedicated staff at our safe house, work together to assist her in gaining legal representation, setting up court dates for custody and visitation, abiding by the Immigration Department's regulations, and more. When she was ready to leave us and move on a few months later, it was due in part to the support she received from the YWCA. She also requested custody of her children, was able to work to obtain her visa and remain in this country, and provide for herself and her family. It will be a long road for Mary, yet the tools she received while at our domestic violence safe house will help Mary overcome future obstacles that may be in her way. Without this much needed law and funding through VAWA, our organizations and others like it would not be able to positively impact such clients as Mary. I urge Congress to pass the bipartisan VAWA reauthorization bill S1925 that protects all victims of violence. Doing nothing is not an option. You are all our leaders, and we know you care about VAWA, so we ask you to solve the procedural challenge to benefit as many victims as possible and get VAWA reauthorized. By reauthorizing the bipartisan VAWA bill that protects all the victims of violence, VAWA programs and services can continue to serve victims such as Mary and make our community a safer place. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you to all the folks from the Y who are out here looking beautiful in your orange. You guys are a beautiful and very color coordinated, curiously enough, crowd. We are now down to our last 2 speakers. The Y has been a stalwart partner of those of us who have been here in Washington doing the footwork on Capitol Hill on behalf of the National Task Force to End Sexual and Domestic Violence, as has the American Bar Association, which is our next speaker. We're going to be joined by Vivian Welgo, who is Chief Counsel for the ABA Commission on Domestic and Sexual Violence at the ABA. Vivian?
Good afternoon. I'm here on behalf of the American Bar Association, on behalf of our over 400,000 members, to ask and to urge Congress to pass VAWA now. VAWA has been the single most effective federal national effort to respond to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking across the country. VAWA ensures that legal and social services are available to victims. And most importantly, to the American Bar Association, VAWA has made sure that law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, lawyers are well trained and are available to help victims. VAWA has ensured that law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, and lawyers can effectively combat these crimes in their communities. VAWA must include all victims. The American Bar Association recognizes that lawyers help victims, but in order to be effective, we need VAWA passed now. VAWA should protect all victims, including children, victims who are disabled, elderly victims, immigrant victims, trafficked victims, victims who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, and victims in Indian country.
A reauthorized VAWA should include the expertise of lawyers, law enforcement, advocates, social workers, and prosecutors from across the country. Let's rely on that expertise and pass a VAWA that includes all victims. Law enforcement across the country, prosecutors across the country have asked Congress to protect all victims, to protect immigrant victims of domestic and sexual violence. Let's pass a VAWA now that protects all victims. VAWA has changed the landscape across this country, changed how courts respond, how judges respond, how lawyers respond. Let's keep it going. Pass a VAWA that includes all victims. Yes. VAWA-funded programs have provided for counseling, for housing, for training for law enforcement, for training for prosecutors, and have provided for civil legal representation. That's right, lawyers for victims, all victims across the country. I'm here on behalf of the American Bar Association, on behalf of our over 400,000 members across this country, asking and urging Congress to pass VAWA now. Thank you.
VAWA now. We are now at the end of our program, and we are going to turn to Wanamahel Dixon, who is the first Vice President of the National Congress of American Indians, and we are going to rely on her to, in the words of James Brown, bring it on home.
Doesn't she just rock? Everybody needs a sister like that, so the world and our society, we have just acknowledged you as one of our universal sisters. You got a big family. You know, one of the things I realized in the journey of tribes and with you as women of our great nation of America, that we do have our differences in that we are in a political relationship with this country, and we have the issue of jurisdiction in our country where non-Indians can perpetrate freely and walk away with no justice done whatsoever. I know you've heard some of these stories and it's hard, but I also know that in this country we have three third world conditions. And you know, if they keep this up, we're going to add a fourth, and that's going to be us women. You know, I realize that Indian country is one of the third countries of America. The Appalachian is the other, and the other one is the Delta. You saw that with Katrina. You've seen the journey of our sisters in the Smokies and the Appalachian country, what they have gone through. We look at the fact that we are the Native women of this country, the first women of this country, but we are not so arrogant to think that we are the only women. We know that as American Indian and Alaska Indian women, we are the indigenous women of this country. We are the first women of this country. But if Native American rights and tribal provisions are not put into the current VAWA, as in S-1925, we will all pay a price. Not just the Native women and Alaska women, but all of you as well.
Don't let it happen.
That's right, don't let it happen. We can say VAWA now, but stand behind me. Let the world know that we are not saying we will accept ever this version HR 4970. No way. It is not our VAWA. No VAWA under 4970. If you're willing to do a real VAWA like S-1925, then step up. Do not leave us in that position. And the tribes now have made a decision we will not support, will accept at all the current version of the VAWA in the House. And they need to know that now. We are leaving here for the next couple of days to go through the halls of Congress, and they will remember our footsteps. They will remember the blood that has been shed by the lack of jurisdiction in Indian country and America as well. There are things that you and I can speak about as sisters of the unknown victims that are amongst our lives. Each and every one of you women here represent at least 10,000. And so if you look at the numbers in this place, we are over 2 million. We are strong as women. Creator made us that way. But for some reason, when it comes to jurisdiction and what's going on with Indian country, they have closed the door and turned a blind eye and allowed America to perpetrate against us unchecked. We have murdered and missing, we have trafficking, but we ask, we were reasonable with this country. They have a trust responsibility with us, and they have failed to cover that. We don't have the luxury of just a senator or two from our state. We have to deal with all 535 members of Congress. So our battle is hard, but you, I am so humbled to look at you because you have stood behind us. You have joined us. It was unthinkable to imagine that all you women and all that you represent would be there by our side, and I thank you, humbly. The sisters here thank you. You are the blood of our blood. You are our relatives. You know, we know this in our thinking. We realize too, as tribal women and tribal leaders, that we travel from these nations across the country. The women behind me and the men behind me come from great nations across the 4 directions in Alaska. And we tell you, real VAWA is in S 1925. We cannot let them put us down. We also know that when we experience violence unchecked in Indian country, the aftermath is felt by the entire village. Our entire nation feels what goes on. It's hard to imagine going back home and knowing that our perpetrators can perpetrate and perpetrate. We also have reservation hopping as perpetrators. They get caught in one res, they move to the next. We are invisible to this country. You have honored us by casting your eyes upon us and giving breath to the words about us. You are our witness in America. We can't be where you are. We go back to our tribal nations to defend them. So we can't be here as you can be here. I'm asking you, carry the heartbeat of these women behind me, the heartbeat in my body, the voices in my ears and on my lips and across my breath. I give to you to speak on our behalf. Because from this day forward, you will represent us. And wherever we go, we have always represented the women of this nation, of this great nation. Aho! I tell you one final word, that if time is to end the race-based jurisdiction, it is race-based when it comes to us as tribes, comes to you as African women, comes to you as Jewish women, as white women, of all the different races that you represent, of the nations you came from. You came from great countries to this country, as your ancestors had. And those of you who have been lucky to have been born in this country, to become the citizens of this country, we share it with you. We are your sisters. We are your relatives. Remember that when we leave, we give you our trust. And you tell the halls of Congress they have a trust responsibility with the tribes of this country, and they cannot go unchecked. We will die. We will give our breath. I am prepared to give my life for my nation. We are raised that way. I have hate hitting me hard because I stand here fighting for you and for us. You know that as the leaders of this great race that we have on VAWA, we have a lot of hate come at us. But I pray to you as I end this meeting in a good way, that you know that Creator stands with you by your side. And we knew when you do the right thing, it seems that hate and envy and jealousy is your constant companions. So if you have that companionship, that means you're doing it right. You're on the red road, as we call it. And so don't be frightened of the hate that comes at you, or the jealousy that comes at you, or the anger that comes at you. You're doing the right thing, because they are the witnesses to stop you. They are there to hold you back. But all of you have come here today and stood in this area under the sky of our fathers and our mothers and our ancestors and the earth of our mother to hold you and cradle you. I say to you this in my way. Creator, come. Bless the hearts of each of these women. Listen to the good hearts of these women. We tell them that when you come, you can hear their footsteps in the morning, so that you know you will recognize them when they come to your door. I ask you in one voice, we stand together. Show me my relations. Aho.